Well, welcome to the show. I'm Edward St. Hay, and tonight we've got Jerry Mitchell with us, the investigative reporter from the Clarion Ledger. You may have noted over the last few days the stories regarding the situation at the prisons, and it's a pretty serious situation, and we've got Jerry here to talk about his investigation into what's going on at the prisons, and we're going to talk to him about all of that. Also, during this week, we hope to bring on some of the famous blues guys that you have heard about and read about through the years. And we had the interview with Peggy Brown, who is from Hit the Road Entertainment, on the broadcast Monday night, and she talked about managing and some of these great artists of international renown. And now, sure enough, we've got some of them coming in to perform, and so later this week we hope to bring you that. And we would like to invite any of you out there who have a tip, go to our website Nightique.com, and you can make comments, or you can talk to us via that site. Email us about any prospective guests that you might recommend. Of course, you know, in the world of entertainment or newsmakers, anything going on in the world of Jackson, Mississippi, we want to report on and have them on our show. So please let us know. We'll be back with Jerry Mitchell from the Clarion Ledger after these words.
Since 1849, Carter Jewelers has been a part of Jackson's rich history. Over 163 years later, we've not only survived, Carter Jewelers has flourished. From generation to generation, we've established a tradition of excellence. Our reputation is built on customer satisfaction, service, and trust. Every piece of jewelry is hand-picked, so you know you're getting the best value.
Nobody says I do like we do at Carter Jewelers.
Come see us and be part of our history.
Ingalls Shipbuilding is hiring electricians, structural welders, machinists, ship fitters, pipe fitters, and pipe welders in our Pascagoula, Mississippi site. Signing bonuses available for pipe welders only. Positions are union represented. Come build your career with Ingalls Shipbuilding. Go to www.huntingtoningalls.com/careers or call 888-935-1507. Well, Jerry Mitchell from the Clarion Ledger with us. And Jerry, thank you for coming.
Oh, you bet.
It's always good to see you. And
it's good to see you.
I'm sure glad that we met during those uplinks that we did back a few months ago for CNN and some of the networks. Right. And now here on this show, we have a contact that we can talk to about interesting things. Okay, I guess you know, the latest investigative story that you are working on, it was in Monday's paper, and it's an ongoing series, is about the prison situation here in the state. It seems to be an unknown thing to many people. I mean, myself, people out there in the general public, I don't think they knew that we had this severe problem. Let's start at the beginning. What is the problem in Mississippi prisons?
Well, essentially, one of the big problems in prison is a gang situation. If you come in the door of prison, you're an inmate, and you know you're brought in for the first time. You've never been to prison before, and you're brought in the first time. Basically, you've got to join a gang, and if you don't join a gang, you will be beaten, you will be extorted, you'll be. They call people who don't join a gang, by the way, peons. That's what they call them. And so you're brought in, and you, in other words, in a matter of basically self-defense, you have to join a gang, or you don't have any choice.
And these are Mississippi gangs?
Well, some of the roots are actually Mississippi. The Folk Nation roots are actually Larry Hoover, and is one of those who actually was born in Mississippi. So. He had his, even though he's known for the gang in Chicago, he had his roots. He was born here. But these are mainly gangs from other places, but they're now around the United States. They're everywhere. It's not like they're not around, but they're definitely prevalent in the prisons.
So now I remember a recent story about the barbaric conditions in one particular prison. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, East Mississippi Correctional Facility, and basically you have, I mean, the photographs kind of tell the story. It's just awful conditions. I mean, you can see some of the meals they're eating, which kind of, you know, don't look very appetizing and much less nutritious, and just different things that are going on. You've got inmates who are being beaten. You've got inmates who are being mistreated. You've got mentally ill. A lot of mentally ill over in East Mississippi. A vast majority of the inmates over there are suffer from some sort of mental illness.
So if you've got a situation where a great proportion of the prison population is mentally ill, I mean, how can that be? I mean, wouldn't you think that these guys have fallen through the cracks?
I mean, obviously, you know, you would ideally they should be in a mental treatment, you know, situation as opposed to being stuck in a prison. I mean, I think anybody would agree that's ideal. I mean, and a lot of them are on psychotropic medication. Well, no, I think it's about 3/4 of the inmates over in.
So, in other words, as a prisoner, they are able to receive.
They get their meds.
The meds, and that could be psychotropic, meaning antidepressants such as that.
Yeah, antidepressants and all sorts of other drugs that kind of fit into that category. Yeah.
Wow, that is incredible. You would think that if a person was diagnosed as mentally ill, they would not be in a normal prison. They would be in a mental facility.
Yeah, you would think that, but it's not correct. Unfortunately, what happened is, you know, basically the idea was the deinstitutionalization that happened in the late 70s, early 80s. The idea behind that is we don't need to lock up people, and it was absolutely, that was correct. But as a result, you ended up with a certain number of people that are mentally ill. And just like you see homeless people walking around, there a large percentage of people who are homeless are unfortunately mentally ill.
Yeah.
And so they wind up, if they act out, they're violent sometimes when they, you know, get off their meds or, you know, have other problems, then they wind up in jail. They wind up in prison, those kinds of things. So it's a bad situation. There's no question about that.
I noticed in one of the articles that the amount of money this state spends on the prisons is higher than any other expenditure.
It's huge. It's $389 million, which is bigger than, like, you combine a lot of things. You know, just the whole entire justice system in Mississippi costs like 68 million, somewhere in that neighborhood. You've got to talk about economic development, hospitals, hospital schools, you know, basically, you know, they have. And you add up all those things, and drug enforcement, and all those things combined are still much less than $389 million. So we spend a lot on corrections.
Do we spend, is that in proportion to other states?
Yeah, it's actually decent because our spending per inmate is actually one of the lower ones in the country.
What does the state say about the fact that we spend so much money, but yet we have barbaric conditions?
Problems, yeah. Well, you know, their defense is the money. I mean, I think that's in general what you usually hear from people that you talk to who are in, you know, positions of authority is, you know, they're trying to do their best with what they have, and that's kind of, but obviously it's a bad situation, and then you add to that the fact that correctional officers are just hardly paid anything. They barely make more than minimum wage. $22,000 a year, which means that they have a family of 3 that qualify for food stamps easily. So that's the kind of stuff that you're dealing with, and so these correctional officers are kind of easy targets for gangs, if that makes any sense, because as I had one gang leader tell me, he said, well, it's easy basically to get these guards to do this. You know, I just go up to the new guard, and most of them are female in prison now, 2/3 I think, go up and say, hey, how'd you like to make $1,000? And he said with $1,000 of tobacco, he can turn that into $10,000 for the gang.
So by selling cigarettes and such?
Yeah, no, cigarettes is actually, the state has banned cigarettes inside prison, but they come in bulk tobacco actually, and they make their cigarettes and smoke it.
So officially you're not
yeah, technically you're not supposed to have cigarettes, you're not supposed to have marijuana, you're not supposed to have all these things.
You know, one thing,
cell phones.
I noticed in the article about the cell phones, and
they're very prevalent, I might add.
So how does one have a cell phone in prison? I mean,
well,
where do you put it where you're not
obvious about it?
Obvious about it.
They wouldn't get in general if the correctional officers didn't let them come in.
So the phones are not being brought in by a relative visitor.
And I probably shouldn't point just at the officers, I should say staff, because it's more than just the officers may be at fault. It may be staff people, maybe people work in the kitchen, it may be, you know what I mean? It could be anybody, secretary, whoever works there, could potentially be bringing in the contraband. And
it's all about money. So in other words, if a cell phone, I noticed in the article, if a cell phone is worth $800, that's
they're charging more than it's worth.
It might be. Yeah, so then it's a
profit. I thought one of the clever things they did was they were charging up to $800 for a touchscreen cell phone, and then they were charging another $250 for the charger. Which, of course, if you normally buy a cell phone, you're not paying that kind of exorbitant price for the charger, but they're smart enough in their sale to know that if you get a cell phone and you don't have a charger, you're pretty much sunk. You're going to have a charger.
But I'm wondering, as far as the cellular service, you have to have a connection with one of the carriers. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, how does?
They establish that before it comes in the door. Yeah, that's established before it comes in the door.
So yes, probably
it's already signed up.
So someone else's name.
Oh yeah.
Of course, yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, I see.
That's how it comes in.
So I see. So cell phones. It's really so one could talk to anybody, I guess.
Absolutely.
About anything, I guess.
Yeah, including reporters.
I see. That's amazing. Well, that's another interesting angle to the story. Yeah. Well, we're going to talk to you for the entire show, and we're going to go into more detail about the situation. I know I didn't know anything about the seriousness of the state of the prisons, and I know a lot of other people out there are finding this as sort of a startling news story. So we're going to talk to Jerry Mitchell a little more about this when we come back. Now, these messages.
I'm an insect ninja. I'm mostly self-trained in the Eastern art of battling insects, and I use a variety of weapons. Throwing stars, the nunchucks, whatever gets the job done.
There is a better way. Bengal's entire line of premium products for all your insect problems in and around the house. Bengal products really work.
Wasp. Well, sometimes there is a little collateral damage.
Yeah, I'm a roach whisperer. I've just always had a way with them. Now, roaches are stubborn, nasty insects, and sometimes you just gotta be forceful with them. Hi, roach, be gone. You're not welcome here, roach.
There is a better way. Bengal Roach Spray. No odor, no mess, no roaches. Bengal Roach Spray really works.
And if whispering don't work, I always got my backup plan.
Welcome back to Nightique. We've got Jerry Mitchell from the Clarion Ledger talking to us about his latest investigative piece on the Mississippi prisons. So basically, with all of the contraband coming in, this is a means, however it's getting in, it's sort of a security breach naturally, and a compromise as far as the integrity of some of the people that perhaps are working at the prisons.
Absolutely, and there've been all. I mean, it goes beyond that. Even it's more than just contraband. There are allegations and reports of things like correctional officers opening doors so that like an inmate or a group of inmates can go in another cell and beat someone up or worse, kill somebody.
I see. You would think that I'm sure there are many cameras around the facilities, right?
Not as many as you think. You would think there'd be a camera every little spare space, but yeah, that's not what I found. The state facilities especially don't have as many cameras.
You would think that'd be one of the first things they'd have. I mean, considering cameras are so pervasive everywhere now.
They really should have cameras everywhere, and I don't know why they don't. I mean, it's not just for not just in terms of documenting things that, let's say, officers have done, but let's say documenting things that inmates have done. I mean, let's say there's a fight or stabbing and you don't know exactly who the assailants are. I mean, video obviously would be able to tell you, here, this is the guy who did it, here he is, But if you don't have video, then you're relying on witnesses, and sometimes they can be discredited. You're going to be inmates testifying, so sure would be nice to have video, so there's no question about it.
You would think that would be one major improvement that could be.
I would think so. They consider that would be. I would think just as a safety issue alone, that makes a lot of sense. I
mean, we're living in a time right now where
digital era,
and cameras are everywhere. I mean, they're at the red lights, they're everywhere, so you would think that would be one of the first things they could
And you would
improve.
think they would have one in every cell. You would think they would have, the places. So one of the problems is that inmates can destroy these cameras or hurt these cameras and that kind of thing. So I understand that's one of the issues.
That's one of the issues. We were talking about the problem there. Is there a race problem in the prisons?
Oh, sure. I mean, it's rooted in the gang problem. I mean, it's the gangs divide along racial lines in general. Although Mississippi has some kind of unique things, like Latin Kings, which is a Hispanic gang, actually has white members in Mississippi, so it's kind of interesting because the Hispanic population isn't quite as large here, obviously. So you actually have white members, a number of them in the Latin Kings.
So the gangs are
they're strictly along racial lines, albeit what they've done is that you've got the vice lords and the gangster disciples are the main foes, I guess you could say.
And or is that a black and white group?
Those are both African American gangs. And then you have, they basically have allies. And so you basically have two alliances that have been formed in Mississippi prisons.
And these same gangs are throughout the country?
Yes, absolutely. What you're seeing in Mississippi is fairly common in general throughout the country.
I know that some of the state representatives are aware of your story. What are they saying? I mean, what is going to be done to help with the barbaric conditions for one thing, and also to help clarify what's happening out there in general?
Oh, it's a good question. I think we'll see that over time. I think our series obviously is still continuing, and we'll see how state officials react to it, and whether they think, what if anything needs to be done? Does there need to be an investigation into
an official investigation?
Yeah, into some of these matters. Does there are there there are different crimes that according to reports have taken place, like assaults and different things like that haven't been prosecuted. One particular investigative report had identified an officer and said, this guy, let's prosecute this guy, but it never happened. So what happened? Does that case still need to be prosecuted? Those are the kinds of things that I'm sure will be looked at.
Does top management, let's say, look the other way sometimes?
Well, I'm not the one to judge. It's just for whatever reason they're not being recommended for prosecution. They're not being prosecuted. Those kinds of things.
So we've talked about through the article. We've seen the barbaric conditions in some of the prisons. The fact that the mentally ill are in there with the rest of the inmates. We've talked about the compromise with some of the employees at the prisons.
Right.
Going forward, what other elements will you be looking at? Can you tell us anything more about that?
Sure. I mean, I'm kind of looking at some of the prisons themselves more specifically, and what are some of the things that have been going on. I mean, some of the documentation for some of the things, like we saw that in East Mississippi, and I'm kind of working on that with some other prisons as well, as those kinds of documentation of things that have been going on. For example, I've got a photograph of literally a 3-foot sword that was inside one of these prisons.
Owned by an inmate?
Yeah, yeah.
So it would be hard to have that in your room without it being found, I would think.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
You would think so. Can we talk a little bit about the main facility? I guess it's Parchman, right? That's the state facility.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest one in the state?
Yeah, one of the biggest ones. Interestingly, it kind of has the reputation of being the place where all the bad guys went, so to speak. But a lot of those guys that were considered the worst of the worst got shipped out, and that they moved into these private prisons. So that's like East Mississippi got a number of those.
And that's a private prison in East
And that's
Mississippi.
a private prison.
So it's run by private sector?
It's run by a company.
By a company.
Yeah.
And that's the one that's got terrible conditions.
Yeah, most of the allegations that have been raised have to do with when it was owned by GEO, which was up through into 2012, but it has since been owned by MTC, which is another company. And so their agreement is they're going to actually run it cheaper than the state. I mean, they agree to do that. And so one of the ways they're able to do that is to actually pay correctional officers even cheaper than the ones in the state who aren't getting paid much of anything anyway.
Seems like a self-defeating cycle.
Yeah, it's not a good situation. I mean, you ideally, you kind of think of, at least people in the corrections business tend to think of themselves as law enforcement, kind of a part of law enforcement. Well, if you're going to have it that way, and I think that's legitimate, then doesn't it make sense to elevate the pay, to have more standards? I know Mississippi, all you have to have literally to be a correctional officer is a GED. You don't have to have any, that's it. That's all you need. There's and the training, let's contrast it with Michigan. 3 weeks of training in Mississippi, 1 week on-the-job training. Michigan, it's 16 weeks, and you have to have a college degree.
But you'd be better prepared to deal with anything
with
that
kind
of training.
You have better training,
right.
You have better education about it, you understand what you may encounter. It's a very tough job.
Now we have a website address.
Yes.
And that's for folks who would like to read more. That's the website for this particular story, Jerry, right?
Right, and it has a number of stories there that people can read, videos, people can watch.
Okay, good. That's at the Clarion Ledger. So, okay, well, thank you, Jerry, for being with us today.
Absolutely.
It moved pretty quickly. We'll have you back if you would like to come.
Sure, I'll come back.
To talk more about this story and other stories as we go
sure,
forward.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate
That's Jerry Mitchell from the Clarion Ledger. Thank you for being with us. We'll be right back after this.
Since 1849, Carter Jewelers has been a part of Jackson's rich history. Over 163 years later, we've not only survived, Carter Jewelers has flourished. From generation to generation, we've established a tradition of excellence. Our reputation is built on customer satisfaction, service, and trust. Every piece of jewelry is handpicked, so you know you're getting the best value.
Nobody says I do like we do at Carter Jewelers.
Come see us and be part of our history.
Ingalls Shipbuilding is hiring electricians, structural welders, machinists, ship fitters, pipe fitters, and pipe welders in our Pascagoula, Mississippi site. Signing bonuses available for pipe welders only. Positions are union represented. Come build your career with Ingalls Shipbuilding. Go to www.huntingtoningalls.com/careers or call 888-935-1507. Thank you for joining us tonight, and please join us every night at 10 o'clock. We are also replayed at 1 a.m. here in the metro area, and we'd like to hear from you. Go to our website, that's nightique.com, and there's a submit your idea portion of the site, and you can advise us on who you think would make a good guest, an entertainer or perhaps a newsmaker or just someone locally that's got an interesting story. See you tomorrow night. Yeah, man, as always.